The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 47 different species gathered for an emergency session. The massive crystalline structure orbiting the neutral world of Nexus Prime had hosted many debates, but none quite like this one. At the center of the controversy sat Ambassador Zethkar, a towering serpentine whose scales shifted between deep emerald and midnight black depending on his emotional state. Right now they were decidedly dark. The humans have requested permission to establish a colony on Kepler 442b, announced Chancellor Vextai, her forearms gesturing dramatically as she addressed the assembly. The insectoid leader's compound eyes reflected the chamber's bioluminescent lighting as she continued. This planet, as you all know, is within the protected territory of the Serpentine Collective. A collective hiss rose from the Serpentine delegation. Their species had evolved from apex predators on a harsh world where survival meant being the most feared creature in any environment, standing nearly 12 feet tall when fully extended, with muscular coils that could crush steel and fangs that dripped with paralytic venom. They had built their galactic reputation on intimidation and fear. No species had ever willingly shared space with them. Ambassador Zethkar rose slowly, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber floor. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of 1,000 generations of predators. Chancellor, the Serpentine Collective has held dominion over the Kepler system for 3 centuries. We have maintained this territory precisely because no other species can coexist with our kind. The humans, like all others, will flee in terror the moment they encounter us. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The rabbit-like Usagi delegation huddled closer together, their ears twitching nervously. The crystalline Siltheran representatives dimmed their natural luminescence, a sign of deep concern. Even the warrior caste Bruthen, known for their fearlessness in battle, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Perhaps, interjected Ambassador Chen Wei, the human representative, we should let actions speak louder than assumptions. The chamber fell silent. Chen Wei was a small figure compared to most of the other delegates, standing barely 6 feet tall with the unremarkable build typical of his species. His dark hair was graying at the temples, and his brown eyes held a calm confidence that seemed almost absurd given the circumstances. Zethkar's scales rippled with what might have been amusement. Human, your species has a reputation for curiosity, but surely even you understand the concept of self-preservation. My people are apex predators. We are death incarnate. Our very presence triggers primal fear responses in every sentient species we have encountered. Every species except one, Chen Wei replied calmly. The Serpentine ambassador's head tilted, a gesture that would have been almost serpentine if not for the deadly intelligence burning in his yellow eyes. Are you suggesting that humans are somehow immune to fear? Your psychological profiles indicate otherwise. Your species experiences terror just as acutely as any other. We do, Chen Wei agreed. But we also have something that sets us apart. We don't let fear make our decisions for us. Zethkar's scale shifted to a deep crimson, a color that typically preceded violence among his kind. Bold words from a species that has never faced a true serpentine in their natural environment. Your colonies have been carefully placed far from our territories for good reason. Chancellor Vextai raised one of her hands for silence. The humans have submitted a formal request through proper channels. However, Ambassador Zethkar raises valid concerns about compatibility. Perhaps a demonstration would be appropriate. What sort of demonstration? Chen Wei asked. Zethkar's massive form coiled slightly, bringing his head down to Chen Wei's eye level. This close, the human could see every detail of the Serpentine's fearsome features. The razor-sharp fangs, each one longer than a human finger. The yellow eyes with pupils that could dilate to perfect circles in darkness. The subtle patterns on his scales that seemed to shift and hypnotize prey species. A simple test, Zethkar hissed, his forked tongue tasting the air near Chen Wei's face. Bring a group of your colonists here. Let them meet my people in a controlled environment. When they flee in terror, as they inevitably will, the matter will be settled. Chen Wei didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't show even the slightest sign of the fear that every other species representative was feeling, just from watching the interaction. And if they don't flee? Zethkar's laugh was a sound like grinding stone mixed with escaping steam. Then the Serpentine Collective will formally withdraw our objection to human colonization of Kepler 442b. But human, understand this. Fear of my kind is not a choice. It is a biological imperative hardwired into the survival instincts of every intelligent species. Your people will break, just as all others have. Then you have nothing to lose by accepting our proposal, Chen Wei pointed out. The chamber held its collective breath as Zethkar considered. His scales cycled through several colors before settling on a deep purple that indicated deep thought. Finally he spoke. Very well, but I choose the Serpentine representative for this test, and I choose the environment. Agreed, Chen Wei said without hesitation. Then it is settled, Chancellor Vexthai announced. The humans will bring a delegation to meet with Serpentine representatives in 7 standard days. The location will be the abandoned mining station on Kepler 442b itself, neutral ground within the disputed territory. As the assembly began to disperse, Zethkar approached Chen Wei one final time. Human, I almost admire your confidence. But confidence without wisdom is merely foolishness. My people have never been wrong about this. Fear of the Serpentine is universal. Your delegates will take one look at our chosen representative and flee. The only question is how quickly. Chen Wei smiled, an expression that seemed to puzzle the massive Serpentine. Ambassador Zethkar, I think you're about to learn something new about humanity. We have a saying, never underestimate the power of a child's wonder to overcome an adult's fear. Before Zethkar could ask what he meant, Chen Wei had turned and walked away, leaving the Serpentine ambassador with scales shifting to a confused mixture of colors he had never displayed before. 7 days. In 7 days, the Serpentine would prove once again that they were the apex predators of the galaxy, and the humans would learn their place in the cosmic order. Of this Zethkar was certain. He had no way of knowing that Chen Wei had already sent a message to Earth, requesting a very specific type of volunteer for their delegation. The message was simple. Need one brave kid who likes snakes. Willing to change galactic history? The abandoned mining station on Kepler 442b had seen better days. Once a thriving operation that extracted rare minerals from the planet's crust, it now stood as a hollow monument to corporate ambition gone wrong. The main habitat dome still held atmosphere, its transparent aluminum walls offering a panoramic view of the alien landscape beyond. Purple grass swayed in the gentle breeze while 3 small moons hung in the lavender sky like ancient sentinels. Ambassador Zethkar had arrived early, along with his chosen representative. The selection had been deliberate and calculated. Sisleth was young by Serpentine standards, barely into her 2nd century, but she embodied everything terrifying about their species. At 14 feet in length when fully extended, her scales were a mesmerizing pattern of silver and black that seemed to absorb light. Her fangs were longer than most, curved like scimitars and perpetually moist with venom that could paralyze a full-grown Bruthan warrior in seconds. More importantly, Sisleth had been born on a world where her species had hunted sentient prey. While the Serpentine collective had long since evolved beyond such practices, joining galactic civilization, the instincts remained. When Sisleth looked at other species, they saw death looking back. Are you certain about this choice? Zethkar asked as they positioned themselves in the center of the habitat dome. The humans specifically requested that we choose our most intimidating representative. Seleth's laugh was like wind through broken glass. Uncle, when have I ever failed to terrify lesser species? Remember the Veltar delegation last year? 3 of them fainted before I even spoke. True, Zethkar admitted, his scales showing satisfaction. But these humans, there is something different about their ambassador. He showed no fear whatsoever. One human with diplomatic training is hardly representative of their species, Sisleth replied, coiling her powerful body into a perfect striking position. Besides, they are bringing civilians, are they not? Colonists have no fear conditioning. They will be pure, honest terror. Through the dome's transparent walls, they could see a human transport vessel descending through the atmosphere. It was a modest ship, built for comfort rather than intimidation, typical human pragmatism over showmanship. As it touched down on the landing pad, Zethkar felt a familiar anticipation building in his chest. In moments, the humans would disembark, take one look at Sisleth, and the matter would be settled forever. The airlock cycled, and Ambassador Chen Wei emerged first, followed by what appeared to be a standard human family. A man and woman in their 30s dressed in the practical clothing of frontier colonists. Behind them came an elderly human with graying hair and the careful movements of advanced age. And finally, Zethkar's scales shifted to a puzzled orange as a small human child bounded out of the ship with the enthusiasm of youth. The boy appeared to be no more than 10 standard years old, with sandy brown hair and bright green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a simple blue jumpsuit and carried a small pack on his back. "Greetings, Ambassador Zethkar," Chen Wei called out as the human delegation approached. "Thank you for agreeing to this demonstration. I'd like you to meet the Morrison family, David, Sarah, and David's father, Eugene. They've volunteered to be our test colonists." Zethkar nodded slowly, his attention focused on the adult humans. They showed the appropriate signs of nervousness. Elevated heart rates detectable by his enhanced hearing, subtle changes in scent that indicated stress, the unconscious clustering behavior typical of prey species, all perfectly normal and expected. "And this young one?" Zethkar inquired, gesturing toward the boy. "That's Tommy," Chen Wei said with a smile. "He's 10 years old and has been very excited about this trip." Seslith raised her head to its full height, towering over the human delegation like a living shadow. Her scales began their intimidating pattern shift, moving from silver black to a deep hypnotic red that had evolved to mesmerize prey. Her fangs extended slightly, venom glistening in the artificial light. The adult humans reacted exactly as expected. David Morrison took a half step backward, his hand instinctively reaching for his wife's arm. Sarah's breath caught audibly and her eyes widened with primal recognition of danger. Eugene, despite his years of experience, couldn't suppress a small tremor in his hands, but Tommy. Morrison did something that no sentient being had ever done when first encountering a serpentine in combat posture. He gasped with pure delight and clapped his hands together. "Oh, wow," Tommy exclaimed, his voice filled with wonder rather than terror. "You're beautiful. Are you really a serpentine? I've read about your species, but I never imagined you'd be so amazing in person." Seslith froze, her intimidation display faltering for the first time in her life. Her scales flickered between colors as her nervous system tried to process this unprecedented response. Zethkar's own scales shifted to a confused mixture of hues he had never displayed before. Tommy took several steps forward, completely ignoring the warning hisses from both serpentines. "Your scales are incredible. They change colors just like the chameleons back on Earth, but so much more complex. And those patterns, they're like living art." "Child," Seslith managed to say, her voice carrying enough menace to make the adult humans flinch. "Do you not understand what you are looking at? I am a predator. I am death incarnate. You should be running in terror." Tommy tilted his head thoughtfully, a gesture that seemed almost familiar to the confused serpentines. "Why would I run? You're one of the most beautiful creatures I've ever seen. My grandmother always told me that being afraid of something just because it's different is silly. She said the best way to handle fear is to learn about what scares you." Zethkar found his voice, though it came out as more of a confused whisper. You feel no fear?" "Oh, I do feel scared," Tommy admitted cheerfully. "My heart is beating really fast and my hands are a little shaky. But that's just my body being cautious. My brain knows you're not going to hurt me." "How can you possibly know that?" Seslith demanded, lowering her head to Tommy's eye level in a movement that would have sent any other species fleeing. Tommy's face lit up with the kind of innocent wisdom that only children possess. "Because if you wanted to hurt us, you would have done it already. Predators don't waste time talking to their prey. They attack. But you're talking to me, which means you're people just like us. And people don't hurt other people without a really good reason." The silence that followed was broken only by the gentle humming of the life support systems and the distant sound of wind across the planet's surface. Zethkar and Seslith stared at the small human boy who had just redefined everything they thought they knew about fear, about their place in the galaxy, and about the strange species called humanity. Finally, Tommy broke the silence with a question that would echo through galactic history. "Can I touch your scales? I promise I'll be really gentle." The question hung in the air like a suspended gravitational field, bending the fabric of everything the serpentines thought they understood about the universe. Seslith's scales cycled through colors that had no names in any galactic language, while Zethkar's massive form seemed to deflate slightly as centuries of certainty crumbled around him. "You want to touch my scales?" Seslith repeated, her voice carrying a mixture of confusion and something that might have been vulnerability. Tommy nodded enthusiastically, completely oblivious to the cosmic significance of the moment. If that's okay with you? I've never met a real serpentine before, and I'm studying xenobiology. Well, it's kind of like studying xenobiology. My mom calls it being obsessed with weird animals, but I think that's the same thing. The adult humans remained frozen in place, caught between their instinctive fear and their amazement at their son's reaction. David Morrison cleared his throat nervously. Tommy, maybe you should— It's all right, Dad. Tommy interrupted, never taking his eyes off Susleth. She's not scary once you really look at her. She's just magnificent. Isileth's scales shifted to a pale blue that indicated deep emotional confusion among her species. In over a century of existence, she had been called many things: terrifying, deadly, nightmare-inducing, the stuff of lesser species' darkest fears. But never magnificent, never beautiful, and certainly never by someone who wanted to touch her. I have never— Sileth began, then stopped, her forked tongue tasting the air uncertainly. Zethkar found his voice first. Child Tommy, you must understand. Sisleth's scales are not just decorative. They are weapons. Her venom can paralyze creatures 10 times your size. Her coils can crush steel. She is designed by evolution to be the perfect killer. Tommy considered this seriously, his young face scrunched up in concentration. That's really cool, but it doesn't change anything. Humans have lots of dangerous parts too. Our teeth can bite, our hands can punch, and my dad knows 17 different ways to hurt someone with just his thumbs. But that doesn't make us evil. It just means we have the ability to protect ourselves if we need to. But we are predators, Sisleth insisted, though her voice lacked its earlier menace. For millions of years, my ancestors hunted and killed creatures like you. Yeah, and my ancestors used to hunt mammoths with pointy sticks, Tommy replied with a shrug. But I don't hunt mammoths. I don't even eat meat most of the time because I think cows are cute. People change. Species change. Just because your great-great-great-grandmother was scary doesn't mean you have to be. Sileth's massive head tilted in a gesture remarkably similar to Tommy's earlier movement. You truly feel no terror when you look at me? Tommy stepped closer, close enough that Sisleth could have struck faster than any human eye could follow. I feel lots of things when I look at you. Wonder, excitement, curiosity, and yeah, a little bit of fear because you're so much bigger than me, but mostly I feel lucky that I get to meet someone so amazing. Amazing, Sisleth whispered as if testing the word for the first time. Can I tell you what I see when I look at you? Tommy asked, his voice filled with the earnest sincerity that only children can manage. Isileth nodded, a barely perceptible movement. I see someone who's probably really lonely, Tommy began, settling cross-legged on the floor to bring himself closer to Sisleth's eye level. I bet most people run away before they even get to know you. That must be really sad. I bet you're actually really smart and funny and have lots of interesting stories to tell. But nobody ever stays long enough to find out. Isileth's scales shifted to a deep purple that Zethkar recognized as profound emotional distress. In their species' color language, it was the shade of grief. I bet you've never had a real friend, Tommy continued, his voice gentle with understanding. Someone who wasn't scared of you. Someone who wanted to hang out just because they liked you, not because they had to for work or politics or anything like that. A sound escaped from Sisleth that no serpentine had ever made in the presence of another species. A soft, keening note that spoke of centuries of isolation and longing. Tommy, Ambassador Chenwei said quietly, perhaps you should— Wait, Zethkar interrupted, his own voice thick with emotions he had never acknowledged before. Let him continue. Tommy scooted a little closer. Would you like to be friends? Real friends, not just political allies or whatever. I promise I'm a really good friend. I share my snacks, I always listen when people want to talk, and I never judge anyone for being different. Being different is the best thing about people. Sisleth's massive form began to tremble, and for a moment, Zethkar feared she might strike out of pure emotional overload. Instead, she did something that would be talked about in xenopsychology textbooks for generations to come. She began to cry. Serpentine tears were different from human tears, crystalline droplets that caught the light like liquid diamonds. They fell silently onto the metal floor of the habitat dome, each one representing a lifetime of fear, isolation, and the desperate hunger for connection that every sentient being carried in their hearts. "Hey, it's okay," Tommy said softly, reaching out slowly with one small hand. "Can I?" Sisileth lowered her great head until Tommy's hand could rest gently against her scales. The moment of contact sent ripples of color across her entire body, waves of silver and gold that spoke of wonder, gratitude, and something that might have been hope. "Your scales are warm," Tommy observed with delight, "and they feel like silk mixed with armor. That's so cool. And look how they change colors when you feel different things. It's like your emotions are painted on the outside. I wish humans could do that. It would make understanding each other so much easier." Zethkar watched in stunned silence as a 10-year-old human child accomplished what millennia of galactic diplomacy had failed to achieve. With nothing but genuine curiosity, kindness, and the fearless wonder of youth, Tommy had bridged a gap that every other species considered unbridgeable. "Sileth," Zethkar said quietly, "how do you feel?" Sisileth's scales shifted to a warm golden hue that indicated joy, a color Zethkar had seen perhaps twice in his entire life among their species. I feel like I've been sleeping for 100 years and someone just woke me up," she replied, her voice filled with awe. Tommy grinned. "That's awesome. Does this mean we can be friends? And does this mean my family can stay on your planet? Because I'd really love to learn more about Serpentine culture. Do you guys have music, games? What do you do for fun?" As questions poured out of Tommy with the unstoppable enthusiasm of childhood, Zethkar realized that everything was about to change. Not just for the Serpentine Collective, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. Because if a 10-year-old human boy could see past their most fearsome exterior to the lonely souls beneath, what else might humanity be capable of? The news of what happened on Kepler 442b spread through the Galactic Council faster than a supernova. Within hours, encrypted communications were flying between homeworlds. Emergency sessions were being called, and xenopsychologists across the galaxy were having their fundamental theories questioned. Dr. Velnara, the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies fear responses, stared at the video feed from the Habitat Dome for the 15th time. Her crystalline form pulsed with confused bioluminescence, as she watched a human child casually stroking the scales of a serpentine, who should have been the stuff of his worst nightmares. "This is impossible," she muttered to her research assistant, a nervous Usagi named Kethwan, whose ears hadn't stopped twitching since the footage arrived. "Every xenobiological principle we understand says this cannot happen. Fear of apex predators is hardwired into survival instincts. It's not a choice." "Perhaps," Kethwan suggested hesitantly, "we have been wrong about humans." "Wrong how?" Dr. Velnara demanded. "Humans show all the standard fear responses. Elevated heart rate, stress pheromones, flight instincts. The adults in that recording displayed perfectly normal terror reactions. But the child didn't." Dr. Velnara's light dimmed as she considered this. One anomalous individual cannot overturn millions of years of evolutionary psychology. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the Serpentine Collective was experiencing its own crisis of understanding. Elder Council meetings that usually lasted hours were stretching into days as leaders tried to process what had happened. For 3,000 years, their species had built their identity around being the most feared predators in the galaxy. It had shaped their politics, their culture, even their sense of self-worth. Elder Morthan, ancient even by Serpentine standards, coiled his massive form around the council chamber's central pillar. His scales were the deep black of extreme age, marked with scars from battles fought when the galaxy was young. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we have been asking the wrong questions all these millennia." "What do you mean, Elder?" asked Counselor Sistra, her younger scales showing the confused orange of uncertainty. "We have always asked, why do they fear us? But perhaps we should have been asking, why do we need them to fear us?" The chamber fell silent except for the subtle sound of scales shifting against stone as the implication sank in. "Because," Morthan continued, "if a single human child can see past our fearsome exterior to find something worth befriending, then perhaps we have been showing the galaxy the wrong face all along." Back on Kepler 442b, Tommy Morrison was having the time of his life. What had started as a simple diplomatic demonstration had evolved into something unprecedented, the first genuine friendship between a human and a serpentine, Sileth. had discovered something wonderful about human children. They asked questions about everything. For hours, Tommy had peppered her with inquiries about serpentine biology, culture, history, and personal experiences. No one had ever shown such genuine interest in her as an individual, rather than as a representative of her species. "So you can taste emotions in the air?" Tommy asked, his eyes wide with fascination as they sat together in the Habitat Dome's observation area. "Yes," Sisleth replied, her forked tongue flickering out to demonstrate. "Your species produces distinct chemical signatures based on emotional states. Fear has a sharp metallic taste. Joy is sweeter, like fresh water. Sadness tastes like the absence of flavor. That's incredible. What do I taste like right now?" Sisleth's tongue tested the air near Tommy, and her scales shifted to a pleased golden hue. "Curiosity has a bright electric taste. And there's something else. Something warm and constant that I think might be friendship." Tommy beamed. "That's so cool. I wish I could taste emotions. It would make understanding people so much easier." "You may not taste them," Sisleth observed, "but you seem to sense them anyway. You knew I was lonely before I said anything." "That wasn't hard to figure out," Tommy replied matter-of-factly. "You live on planets by yourselves, you never visit other species, and everyone runs away when they see you. Of course you're lonely. Anyone would be." The simplicity of the observation struck Sisleth like a physical blow. How had an entire galaxy of sophisticated civilizations missed something so obvious that a 10-year-old could see it immediately? "Tommy," Sisleth said carefully, "what would happen if more humans met my people the way you met me?" Tommy considered this seriously. "Well, some adults would probably still be scared at first because they're not used to people who look different. But kids would think you were awesome. And once the adults saw that their kids weren't afraid, they'd probably calm down too. That's how it works with most things." "Most things?" "Yeah, like when my little sister was afraid of our neighbor's dog. She was crying and hiding behind my mom whenever she saw it. But then I showed her how gentle the dog was, let her watch me pet it and play with it. Now she loves that dog more than anyone. Fear usually goes away once you realize there's nothing to actually be afraid of." Sisleth's scales shimmered with rapid color changes as she processed this information. "You believe fear can be cured?" "Not cured exactly," Tommy corrected. "But you can choose what to do with it. My dad taught me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared." At that moment, Ambassador Chen Wei approached with David Morrison and Zethkar in tow. The human father still showed signs of nervousness around the massive serpentine ambassador. But his primary emotion was clearly wonder at watching his son interact so naturally with a being that should have terrified him. "Tommy," David said gently, "we need to talk about what happens next." "What do you mean?" Chen Wei knelt down beside the boy. "What you've done here today is extraordinary, Tommy. You've shown that humans and serpentines can be friends. But now we need to think about how to help other people understand what you've discovered." Tommy looked between the adults and Sisleth, his young mind grappling with the weight of responsibility. "You mean I have to teach other people not to be scared?" "Not exactly," Zethkar interjected, his voice gentler than it had ever been when addressing another species. "But perhaps you could help us understand how to approach others the way you approached Sisleth." "That's easy," Tommy replied with the confidence of youth. "You just have to stop trying to be scary and start trying to be friendly. Instead of showing people your fangs and your scary scales, show them your beautiful scales and your interesting stories. Be curious about them instead of trying to make them afraid of you." Sisleth's scales shifted to a contemplative blue-green. "You make it sound simple." "It is simple," Tommy insisted. "Being friends is always simple. It's the fear that makes everything complicated." As the adult representatives exchanged glances loaded with political and social implications, Tommy Morrison sat cross-legged on the floor of an abandoned mining station, gently stroking the scales of the galaxy's most feared predator, completely unaware that he had just outlined a blueprint for revolutionizing interspecies relations across the known universe. The boy who had never learned to fear the right things was about to teach the galaxy how to hope for the impossible. 3 months after the incident on Kepler 442b, the galaxy was still reeling from the implications. The Galactic Council had established a new committee specifically to study the Morrison effect, as xenobiologists had begun calling it. Emergency sessions were being held across multiple sectors as species grappled with the possibility that their most fundamental assumptions about Predator-prey relationships might be wrong, but nowhere were the changes more evident than on Earth, where Tommy Morrison had become the most reluctant celebrity in human history. "I don't understand why everyone is making such a big deal," Tommy complained to his mother as they walked through the corridors of the Luna Station research facility. "I just made a new friend. People do that every day." Sarah Morrison smiled at her son's innocent frustration. In the months since Kepler 442b, their family had been thrust into the spotlight of galactic politics. Tommy had been interviewed by xenobiologists, psychologists, diplomats, and journalists from dozens of species. His simple act of friendship had sparked a revolution in interspecies relations theory. "Because, sweetheart," Sarah explained patiently, "you did something that no one thought was possible. You proved that fear isn't as powerful as everyone believed." They were heading to another interview, this time with Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's leading expert in xenopsychology. The scientist had requested a meeting not for research purposes, but because she was leading the first human expedition to make contact with another, impossible species, the Void Stalkers. Dr. Vasquez met them in her laboratory, a pristine white space filled with holographic displays showing various alien species. She was a tall woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Tommy," she said warmly, "thank you for coming. I have something important to ask you." "Are you going to ask me to explain how I wasn't scared again?" Tommy asked with the weary tone of someone who had answered the same question 1,000 times. Dr. Vasquez laughed. "Actually, no. I want to ask for your help with something new." She activated a holographic display showing a creature that seemed to be made of living shadow. It had multiple tentacles that ended in what appeared to be mouths full of needle-sharp teeth, eyes that glowed with an eerie blue light, and an overall form that seemed to shift and flow like liquid darkness. Tommy studied the image with his characteristic careful attention. "They look really sad," he said finally. Dr. Vasquez blinked in surprise. "Sad? Most people say they look terrifying." "Well, yeah, they look scary too," Tommy admitted. "But look at their eyes. They're the same kind of sad that Sisileth had. Lonely sad. Like they're tired of being alone." "These are the Void Stalkers," Dr. Vasquez explained. "They live in the space between star systems, in the cold dark where nothing else can survive. Every species that has encountered them has fled in terror. They're considered the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy." "Have they ever actually hurt anyone?" Tommy asked. "Well, no," Dr. Vasquez admitted. "Every encounter has ended with the other species retreating before any real interaction could take place." Tommy nodded sagely. "So nobody knows if they're actually dangerous or just look dangerous." "Kind of like Sisileth, exactly. And that's why I need your help. The human government is planning to make first contact with the Void Stalkers. We want to try a different approach than what's been done before. You want me to come with you? Would you be willing?" "I know it's a lot to ask and your parents would have to agree, but Tommy, you have a gift for seeing past fear to the real person underneath. If anyone can make friends with a Void Stalker, it's you." Tommy looked at his mother, who was wearing the expression of a parent caught between pride and terror. "Mom?" Sarah Morrison had spent the last 3 months watching her 10-year-old son become the galaxy's most effective diplomat. She had seen him form genuine friendships with species that had been isolated for millennia. But this felt different, more dangerous. "The Void Stalkers aren't like the Serpentines," she said carefully. "They don't even live on planets. They exist in the vacuum of space itself. That's why we've developed a new type of first contact protocol," Dr. Vasquez explained. "We'll use a specially shielded observation station positioned at the edge of their territory. If Tommy can establish communication, we'll know if peaceful contact is possible. If not, we retreat." Tommy was already nodding enthusiastically. "When do we leave?" 2 weeks later, Tommy found himself aboard the exploration vessel Friendship, a name chosen specifically for this mission, watching through reinforced viewports as they approached the edge of known space. The ship was equipped with the most advanced life support and communication systems humanity had ever built, designed specifically for this unprecedented contact attempt. Captain Martinez, a veteran explorer with kind eyes and steady hands, knelt down beside Tommy as they prepared for the encounter. "Are you nervous, son?" "A little," Tommy admitted. "But mostly I'm excited. I've never met anyone who lives in space before. I have so many questions about how they survive out there, what they eat, whether they have families. What if they really are dangerous? Asked Dr. Vasquez, voicing the fear that everyone was carefully not mentioning. Tommy considered this seriously. Then we'll learn that too, and we'll leave them alone. But I don't think they are. I think they're just really, really lonely. Imagine living your whole life in empty space with nobody to talk to. That would be terrible. Through the viewports, space itself seemed to shimmer and darken. Sensors began detecting anomalous readings as something vast and impossible approached their position. The crew held their breath as the first Void Stalker appeared. It was even more otherworldly than the holographic displays had suggested. Easily the size of a small ship, it moved through the vacuum like a living shadow, its multiple appendages flowing in patterns that seemed to defy physics. Its glowing blue eyes fixed on their vessel with an intelligence that was unmistakably alien, yet somehow familiar. Most of the crew instinctively stepped back from the viewports. The thing outside was the stuff of nightmares, a creature that violated every comfortable assumption about life and biology. Tommy pressed his face against the viewport and waved. The Void Stalker stopped moving. For a long moment, creature and child regarded each other across the impossible gulf of space and evolution. Then slowly, tentatively, one of the Void Stalker's appendages rose in what could only be described as a return wave. "Hello," Tommy called out, even though the creature couldn't possibly hear him through the vacuum. "I'm Tommy." "What's your name?" The Void Stalker began to pulse with patterns of light that ran along its body like living constellations. Dr. Vasquez frantically activated the communication array, trying to record and analyze the display. "I think it's trying to talk to us," she whispered in amazement. Tommy pressed both hands against the viewport, his breath fogging the reinforced glass with excitement. "I think you're right. And I think it's just as curious about us as we are about it." As the Void Stalker continued its light display, creating patterns of increasing complexity and beauty, Tommy Morrison prepared to make his second impossible friend. Because in a universe full of wonders and terrors, he had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the most frightening things are just the most misunderstood things, waiting for someone brave enough to say hello. The communication breakthrough came 12 hours into the encounter, when Dr. Vasquez realized that the Void Stalker's light patterns weren't random, they were mathematical. Prime numbers followed by Fibonacci sequences, then increasingly complex equations that demonstrated not just intelligence, but a sophisticated understanding of universal concepts. Tommy had fallen asleep pressed against the viewport, one small hand still touching the glass as if maintaining connection with the creature outside. The Void Stalker had remained motionless throughout the night, its bioluminescent patterns dimmed to a gentle glow that seemed almost protective. It's been watching over him. Captain Martinez observed quietly as the day shift took over. Like a guardian, Dr. Vasquez nodded, her eyes heavy from a sleepless night of analysis. The mathematical progressions it's been displaying are incredibly advanced. This isn't just intelligence, this is a civilization. But Tommy was right about something else too. What's that? The recurring patterns in its light displays. There's a mathematical signature that appears again and again. In human communication theory, we call it a loneliness algorithm. Patterns that indicate isolation, the desire for connection, the hope for response. When Tommy woke, the first thing he saw was the Void Stalker still floating outside, its massive form silhouetted against the starfield. The moment the boy stirred, the creature's light patterns brightened, pulsing in what could only be described as excitement. "Good morning," Tommy said cheerfully, placing his hand back on the viewport. "Did you sleep okay? Do you even sleep? I have so many questions." The Void Stalker's response was immediate, cascading waves of blue and silver light that flowed across its body like aurora. Dr. Vasquez rushed to her instruments, capturing every pattern. "Tommy," she said excitedly, "I think it's responding to your voice patterns. Look at this. Every time you speak, the mathematical sequences become more complex, more organized. It's learning from you." "Of course it is," Tommy replied, as if this was the most natural thing in the universe. That's what friends do. They learn about each other. Over the following days, something unprecedented unfolded. The Void Stalker, Tommy had started calling it Star, much to everyone's amusement, began teaching them about its species through increasingly sophisticated light displays. They learned that the Void Stalkers weren't individuals but rather collective consciousnesses. each one representing thousands of smaller entities working in harmony. They didn't live in space so much as they were space itself in a sense, existing in dimensions that human science was only beginning to understand. But most importantly, they learned that the Void Stalkers had been trying to communicate with other species for millennia, only to be met with terror and retreat every time they approached. They think they're broken, Tommy explained to the crew during one of their briefings, his young face serious with the weight of translation. Star showed me patterns that mean sadness, and they're all about being different. They think there's something wrong with them because everyone runs away. Captain Martinez leaned forward. How can you tell what the patterns mean? It's like learning a new language, except instead of words, they use math and light and feelings all mixed together. Star is really good at showing me what things mean by making pictures with the lights. Dr. Vasquez pulled up a recording from the previous day. This sequence here, it's been repeated dozens of times. Can you tell us what it means? Tommy studied the flowing patterns of light, his brow furrowed in concentration. It means... Are you real? Are you staying? Please don't leave like the others did. It's really sad. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. For thousands of years, the Void Stalkers had been reaching out to other species, only to be rejected again and again, based purely on their appearance. There's something else. Tommy continued. Star wants to show me something, but it's afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that if it shows me where the others are, we'll run away too. Dr. Vasquez exchanged glances with Captain Martinez. Others? Tommy nodded solemnly. There are lots of Void Stalkers, a whole community of them. They've been watching other species from far away for a really long time, hoping someone would want to be friends, but nobody ever did. Tommy, Captain Martinez said carefully, would you like to ask Star if we could meet the others? Tommy's face lit up. Really? You're not scared? We're all scared, Dr. Vasquez admitted, but we're also curious. And if you trust them, then maybe we should trust them too. Tommy turned back to the viewport and began speaking to Star in a mixture of words and gestures, knowing somehow that the creature could understand intent even if not language. The Void Stalker's response was immediate and overwhelming. Patterns of light so complex and beautiful that they seemed to transform the surrounding space into a living constellation. What happened next would be remembered as one of the most awe-inspiring moments in galactic history. Space. Around the friendship began to shimmer and flow as more Void Stalkers appeared. Dozens at first, then hundreds, their collective light display turning the cosmos into a vast, living artwork. Each creature was unique with its own patterns and colors, yet they moved in perfect harmony like dancers in a cosmic ballet. The crew stood transfixed as an entire civilization revealed itself. Beings of impossible beauty who existed in the spaces between worlds, who had watched and waited and hoped for millennia that someone, anyone, would see past their alien nature to the consciousness within. Tommy pressed both hands against the viewport, tears streaming down his face. They're so beautiful, he whispered. And they've been so lonely. Dr. Vasquez was frantically recording everything, but she paused to look at the 10-year-old boy who had once again accomplished the impossible. Tommy, do you realize what you've done? You've just made first contact with an entire civilization that has been isolated for thousands of years. Tommy wiped his eyes and smiled. I just said hello. That's what you do when you meet new people. Outside, the Void Stalkers continued their light display, and for the first time in their ancient history, they were dancing not just for themselves but for an audience that saw them not as monsters, but as friends. The boy who had taught the galaxy that fear was a choice had just proven that friendship was a universal language, spoken not with words but with open hearts and the courage to see wonder where others saw only terror. As the dance of lights continued around them, Tommy began planning his next question for Star. Do you want to meet my other friends? I know a really nice Serpentine who would love to see your light patterns. Because in Tommy Morrison's universe, every stranger was just a friend waiting to happen. 1 year later, the abandoned mining station on Kepler 442b had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history, the first interspecies friendship center. What had once been a hollow monument to corporate failure was now a bustling hub of cross-cultural exchange, where beings who had never imagined sharing space were learning to live, work, and play together. Tommy Morrison, now 11 and considerably taller, stood on the observation deck watching his two best friends demonstrate something that would have been considered impossible just months earlier. Sleth, her scales shimmering with patterns that indicated pure joy, was teaching Star, who had taken a smaller, more compact form for planetary visits, how to play what humans called tag. The sight would have given xenobiologists across the galaxy heart attacks. A massive serpentine predator and a reality-defying void stalker chasing each other around a playground that had been designed for human children, both of them producing sounds that could only be described as laughter. "They're having fun," observed Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had become the station's director of interspecies relations. "I'm still not entirely sure how a void stalker experiences fun, but those light patterns definitely indicate happiness." Tommy grinned. "Star says fun is the same in every dimension. It's when you forget to worry about being different and just enjoy being yourself." Ambassador Chen Wei joined them on the observation deck, his weathered face showing the satisfaction of a diplomat who had watched impossible become routine. In the years since Tommy's first contact with the Serpentines, the boy had become an unofficial ambassador himself, facilitating meetings between species that had never dreamed of peaceful coexistence. "The council meeting went well," Chen Wei reported. "The Crystalline Collective has agreed to consider establishing a cultural exchange program. Apparently, their youngest members are quite curious about the human child who makes friends with monsters." "They're not monsters," Tommy corrected automatically, a phrase he'd had to repeat so often it had become his unofficial motto. "They're just people who look different." "I know that, you know that, and increasingly the galaxy knows that," Chen Wei agreed. "But there are still those who struggle with the concept." As if summoned by their conversation, a transport ship descended through the atmosphere and landed on the station's primary pad. The vessel bore the insignia of the Velnaran Academic Institute, the galaxy's most prestigious center for xenobiological research. "Dr. Velnara is here for her follow-up study," Dr. Vasquez noted. "She's been trying to understand the psychological mechanism behind what she calls the Morrison effect." Tommy sighed. "She's going to ask me to explain it again, isn't she?" "Probably. Are you okay with that?" "I guess. But I wish she'd spend more time playing with Star and Cecileth instead of just studying them. You learn more about people by being their friend than by watching them through instruments." Dr. Velnara emerged from the transport, her crystalline form pulsing with the methodical patterns that indicated scientific curiosity. She had spent the better part of a year trying to quantify and explain how a human child could consistently overcome biologically programmed fear responses. Her research had revolutionized the field of xenopsychology, but she still struggled with the fundamental simplicity of Tommy's approach. "Tommy," she said as she approached the observation deck, "thank you for agreeing to another interview. I have some new theories I'd like to test. Can we do it while we play?" Tommy asked. "Star and Cecileth want to show you this new game they invented. It's like three-dimensional chess, except it uses light patterns and color changes instead of pieces." Dr. Velnara's luminescence flickered with uncertainty. "I'm not sure that would provide the controlled environment necessary for proper research. But it would be more fun," Tommy pointed out. "And when people are having fun, they show you who they really are. That's when you learn the most important stuff." Despite her scientific training, Dr. Velnara found herself being led to the playground area where Cecileth and Star were waiting. What followed was an hour that would later be described in her research notes as simultaneously the most unproductive and most enlightening interview of my career. Instead of conducting formal observations, Dr. Velnara found herself attempting to learn the rules of a game that seemed to exist in 4 dimensions simultaneously. Star would create light patterns that Cecileth would interpret through color changes in her scales, while Tommy somehow understood both languages well enough to serve as translator and referee. "The key," Tommy explained as Dr. Velnara struggled to follow a move that seemed to violate several laws of physics, "is that you have to think about what the other person is feeling, not just what they're doing. Star's moves aren't just patterns, they're emotions made visible, and Cecileth's colors aren't just reactions, they're conversations." As Dr. Velnara watched Tommy interact with his alien friends, she finally began to understand what had eluded her scientific instruments. The boy didn't overcome fear through some special psychological mechanism. He simply chose empathy over apprehension, curiosity over caution, connection over separation. "It's not that you don't feel fear," she realized aloud. It's that you feel other things more strongly. Tommy nodded enthusiastically. Fear is just one feeling. Wonder is bigger. So is friendship. When you focus on the big feelings, the small ones don't matter as much. But how do you know which feelings to trust? Tommy considered this seriously, pausing in the game to give the question the attention it deserved. You trust the feelings that bring people together instead of pushing them apart. Fear pushes people apart. Curiosity brings them together. Love brings them together. Joy brings them together. It's not complicated. Dr. Velnara's crystalline form pulsed with slowly shifting patterns as she processed this simple wisdom. Around them, the Friendship Center buzzed with activity. Humans, serpentines, voidstalkers, and increasingly, members of other species who had heard about this remarkable place where differences were celebrated rather than feared. Tommy, Dr. Velnara said finally, I believe you may have discovered something that will change how we understand consciousness itself. The ability to choose empathy over fear may be the most important evolutionary development in galactic history. Tommy shrugged with the casual wisdom of a child who had never doubted that. Friendship was the natural state of the universe. Maybe, or maybe everyone always knew how to do it. And they just forgot because they were too busy being scared to remember. As the three friends resumed their impossible game, Dr. Velnara made a note that would appear in research papers for generations to come. The subject continues to demonstrate that the greatest scientific discoveries are often the simplest truths, waiting for someone young enough to believe in them. Outside the station's transparent walls, the purple grass of Kepler 442b swayed in the alien breeze, and three small moons hung in the lavender sky like ancient sentinels watching over a new age of galactic friendship. An age that had begun when a 10-year-old boy decided that being different was no reason not to be friends. In the end, Tommy Morrison had done something far more remarkable than making friends with monsters. He had reminded the galaxy what it meant to be truly civilized. Not to fear the unknown, but to embrace it with open hearts and curious minds. The boy who had never learned to fear the right things had taught the universe how to hope for everything.